Hello, welcome to Non-Dual Christianity. Today we'll be focusing on the topic of what is God? Consciousness. Can anything exist outside of consciousness? Can anything exist that God, which is sort of divine conscious awareness, is not aware of? See, if you say yes, then the question is, well, how could it exist? Because by definition, it would be unknown or unperceivable. So in what way could it be existent? So interestingly, then, when we talk about being of God, which is existence and giving rise to all that exists, and then we look at consciousness being necessary for existence, because otherwise in what way could something exist if not known or perceivable, then we could say that being and consciousness are really one. Only that which is known can exist. So conscious awareness, which you are as well, is the divine, because that conscious awareness is what is the very nature of being, and it is what is necessary in order for all the world around you to exist. It's prior to the material world, to the world of form, because if the material world was prior to it, then the material world could exist without consciousness. And what we just said was, how could something exist without conscious awareness of it? So this would be evidence or support that consciousness is prior to the material world, and therefore the material world is taking place within consciousness as compared to the contrary. Another evidence that consciousness is prior to the material world instead of coming from it is your own subjective experience. See, when you look at a rose, you have an experience of the redness, of the texture, of the beauty, of the smell, and that experience cannot be explained by anything that is objectively measuring what's happening in your brain. You could put electrodes on your brain, you could measure all the brain waves, you could even see what kind of light spectrums are hitting your eyes, but you're never going to get to what it is like to experience a rose by measuring objective data. And this is the hard question of consciousness, because if consciousness comes from the material world, then why is there something that we experience which cannot be measured? Therefore, many would conclude that consciousness must be somehow outside of, and as we just said, prior to the material world. And so the subjective experience is able to observe what is internal to it, to its awareness. Now, if consciousness is necessary for everything to exist, then how can things exist which if I am consciousness, don't know about? And this is another aspect of consciousness, because divine consciousness, everything happens internal to it, but my consciousness is limited by its default state. And so consciousness seems to have this innate ability to appear as plurality, to appear as me, to appear as you, and yet it doesn't lose its oneness or its central identity and become something other than consciousness. In some ways, I wonder if this very much explains what the doctrine of the Trinity is trying to describe, where you have this plurality and unity at the same time. A couple other evidences why consciousness needs to be prior to instead of coming from the material world is, if all that exists is material world, nature, form, then abstract concepts would be difficult to explain. The content of our mental processes would be difficult to explain, because even if you're measuring how neurons are firing with each other, where does the content come from? And even in quantum physics, when we talk about the behavior of protons, where they can be wave or particle depending on the awareness, the consciousness of the observer, these things would all tend to indicate that the physical world, the material world, the world of form, is somehow dependent on consciousness itself, which goes with God's, the divine being, giving rise to existence, and then the divine consciousness, everything is happening within it. Thank you for exploring this topic with me today.